At the beginning of my wedding day, everything felt like a dream. The flowers were perfectly arranged, the music floated softly through the air, and the faces of my family and friends lit up with joy as they filled the seats. I could feel the weight of every moment pressing down on my chest, the kind of weight that comes when you've waited your whole life for something, when you've fought through heartbreaks, disappointments, and nights of crying into your pillow just to finally arrive at this one perfect day. I remember standing in the back of the venue, holding my bouquet so tightly that my knuckles turned white, reminding myself over and over that this was my fresh start. I wasn't the broken girl anymore, the one who spent years being lied to, manipulated, and made to feel small. I was the bride, the woman about to marry the love of her life, someone who had shown me what kindness and respect really meant. And yet, beneath the surface of my smile, a whisper of fear kept asking, what if the past finds its way back? The truth is, I had been haunted by my ex for years. Even after the breakup, even after he moved on to other women, his voice still lived inside me, echoing every cruel thing he ever said. You'll never find better than me. No one will love you the way I do. You're nothing without me. At first, I believed him. I stayed far longer than I should have, chained by the idea that love meant pain, that suffering in silence was proof of loyalty. But then, little by little, I started to see the cracks in his mask. The late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. The whispered excuses about why he couldn't be home on time. The bruises he brushed off as accidents when I knew exactly how they had formed. My ex wasn't just toxic, he was destructive. He wanted to own me, not love me. And when I finally gathered the courage to leave, he didn't let go quietly. He showed up at my work, at my parents' house, even outside my window at night. So as I prepared to walk down the aisle, I prayed that today, of all days, he would stay buried in the past. When the music began and I stepped forward, every head turned. My fiancé, no, my soon-to-be husband, looked at me with eyes that carried nothing but love, and for the first time in years I felt safe. Each step down the aisle washed away a little more of the darkness that had clung to me. My dress brushed against the floor, my heart pounded like a drum, and in that moment, I believed that nothing could ruin this. We exchanged vows, promising honesty, faithfulness, and respect. His voice trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of truth, the kind that only comes when someone means every word. And then it was my turn. I spoke about the way he had healed me, the way he taught me to laugh again, to breathe without fear, to wake up and feel joy instead of dread. The audience sniffled and dabbed at their eyes. My parents smiled, proud and relieved. It was perfect, until a voice cut through the air like a blade. She's mine. The words tore the silence apart, echoing through the hall with such force that the entire room froze. My ex stood at the back of the venue, his face twisted with rage, his fists clenched as if he were ready to fight the world itself. I felt my body lock up, my heart plummet to my stomach. For a moment, it felt like I was back in that small apartment with him, cowering as he slammed doors and shouted insults. Guests gasped, some whispering in confusion, others turning to look at me, waiting for my reaction. My husband's grip on my hand tightened, steadying me. But my ex wasn't finished. He marched forward, his voice rising, shouting about how I was making a mistake, how I belonged to him, how everyone in the room should know the truth. I could feel the shame crawling up my skin, the familiar urge to shrink, to disappear. But then something inside me snapped. This was my wedding. This was my life. And if he wanted to expose the past, then I would be the one to tell the story. I stepped forward, letting go of my husband's hand just long enough to face the man who had once controlled me. My voice trembled at first, but it grew stronger with each word. You want them to know the truth? I asked, my eyes locked on his. Then let me tell them. The room fell into silence. Every guest leaned in, waiting. My ex smirked, confident that I would falter, that I would crumble under the weight of his presence. But he had no idea who I had become. I took a deep breath and began to speak, not to him, but to everyone who had ever doubted me, everyone who had ever believed his lies. I told them about the nights I spent crying alone because he was out cheating with strangers. I told them about the bruises I covered with makeup, the words he used like weapons, the way he isolated me from friends and family. I told them how he tried to convince me I was worthless, that no one else would ever want me. And then I told them the truth he never wanted anyone to hear, that I left because I found the courage to love myself more than I feared him. The whispers began immediately. Faces turned pale. Some of my relatives looked horrified, others angry. My father's jaw tightened as though he were holding back years of rage. My mother clutched her chest, her eyes filling with tears. My bridesmaids stood frozen, their bouquets trembling in their hands. And my husband, he looked at me with pride, not pity. He squeezed my hand, silently telling me that I was doing the right thing. My ex's smirk faltered. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally, but there were none left. For years, he had hidden behind charm, behind fake apologies and empty promises. But here, under the weight of truth, his mask crumbled. And still, I wasn't finished. "You think I belong to you?" I said, my voice steady and clear. "You don't own me. You never did. And today, in front of everyone who matters, I'm choosing to belong only to myself, and to the man who actually deserves my love." The room erupted into applause. It wasn't polite clapping, it was raw, thunderous, filled with relief and solidarity. My ex staggered back as though the sound itself had struck him. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not because of me, but because his power was gone. He had no control here, no audience willing to believe his lies. He muttered something under his breath, turned, and stormed out, the heavy doors slamming shut behind him. And just like that, the weight that had haunted me for years lifted. I stood there, trembling but unbroken, surrounded by people who finally knew the truth. My husband pulled me into his arms, whispering that I was the bravest person he had ever known. And as the music began again, I realized that my wedding day wasn't just about celebrating love, it was about reclaiming my life. The rest of the ceremony moved forward, but nothing was the same. The air was charged with something more powerful than joy, it was filled with justice. Guests approached me, one after another, telling me how proud they were, how strong I was, how they had never realized what I had endured. For years, I had carried the shame of my ex's actions as though it were my burden alone. But by speaking the truth, I had given it back to him where it belonged. And in doing so, I had freed myself. As I danced with my husband, surrounded by friends and family who finally saw me clearly, I felt lighter than I ever had before. The shadows of the past no longer clung to me. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, I was defined by the strength it took to survive and to speak. Looking back, I realized that my ex thought crashing my wedding would be the ultimate victory. He believed that by shouting, "She's mine," he could reclaim control, humiliate me, and make me doubt myself one last time. But in reality, he gave me the greatest gift. He gave me the stage, the moment, and the audience I needed to tell my story. He thought he could break me in front of everyone I loved, but instead, he gave me the chance to rise in front of them. And I did. My voice didn't just belong to me anymore, it belonged to every woman who had ever been silenced, every person who had ever been told they weren't enough. My wedding wasn't ruined. It was transformed. It became more than a ceremony, it became a declaration of freedom. So when I think back to that day, I don't remember the interruption as a tragedy. I remember it as the moment I proved to myself, once and for all, that I was stronger than my past. That no matter how loudly someone screams, they cannot define me. That love, real love, isn't about possession or control, but about respect, safety, and trust. And as I walked away from the altar, hand in hand with the man who had chosen me not to own, but to cherish. I knew the truth. I was finally free. Sometimes life has a way of testing us in the most public and unexpected moments. What happened at my wedding wasn't just about an ex trying to ruin a special day, it was a mirror of how many of us carry our past into our present. We all have voices that echo inside us, voices of people who once tried to control us, belittle us, or make us feel small. Maybe it's a former partner, maybe a toxic boss, maybe even a family member who never believed in us. And then, just when we think we've moved on, those voices find a way to show up again, louder than ever, daring us to shrink back into who we once were. But the truth is, those moments are not there to break us, they are opportunities to stand taller, to prove to ourselves and to the world that we are no longer defined by our pain, but by our ability to rise above it. The lesson from that day is simple but powerful. Silence is what gives power to those who hurt us, but truth is what sets us free. Too often, we hide our scars out of shame, thinking that if people knew what we had endured, they would see us differently. But what if it's the opposite? What if, by sharing our struggles, we not only free ourselves but also inspire others to break their silence? In our daily lives, this can look like speaking up in a meeting when someone tries to take credit for our work, or standing up for a friend who's being belittled, or even finally telling ourselves in the mirror, "I deserve better." Every time we choose truth over silence, we take back a piece of our power. And the more we practice it, the more unshakable we become. Another lesson is that love, true love, whether from a partner, a friend, or even from ourselves, does not seek to control, but to uplift. Many people stay in toxic relationships, jobs, or environments because they mistake control for love, manipulation for loyalty, fear for passion. But as we saw, real love holds your hand when the world shakes, looks at you with pride when you reveal your truth, and chooses to stand with you even when the past tries to drag you down. In our everyday lives, we can measure love not by grand gestures but by the quiet moments of safety, trust, and encouragement. Ask yourself, who in your life makes you feel free to be yourself, not trapped in who they want you to be? That is where real love lives. We also learn that the people who try to shame us often expose themselves when faced with truth. My ex thought he could humiliate me, but instead, he ended up showing everyone exactly who he was. And isn't that how life often works? When someone mistreats you at work, in friendships, or in relationships, you don't need to shout louder than them, you just need to stand in your truth. Over time, their lies collapse under their own weight, while your authenticity shines brighter. In daily life, this might mean letting your actions speak for themselves, trusting that consistency, kindness, and honesty will always outlast cruelty and manipulation. The truth has a way of surviving long after the noise has faded. Finally, that day taught me that we are never truly free until we choose to reclaim our own narrative. For years, I let someone else's version of me control the way I saw myself. But by speaking up, I took ownership of my story, and once you do that, no one can take it away. In our everyday struggles, whether we're chasing a dream, healing from a loss, or breaking free from a toxic environment, we must remind ourselves, our story belongs to us, not to the people who tried to silence it. And every time we choose to tell it with courage, we not only set ourselves free but also light the path for someone else who's still in the dark, waiting for the courage to speak. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it touched you, if it made you reflect on your own journey, I invite you to share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can join me in more stories like this, stories of pain, truth, and healing that remind us of our strength. And if you've ever had a moment where you stood up to your past and claimed your power back, share it in the comments below. Your story might be the one that inspires someone else to finally speak their truth.